Along a coastal road, we're traveling to the heart of one of the world's worst nuclear disasters, Fukushima. It began with the strongest earthquake in Japan's history. The clock on the beach house, still frozen in time. First the earthquake struck, then the tsunami submerged this third floor. Destruction doesn't describe it.
Australia's worst bushfire season on record looks set to become a whole lot worse. Saturday brought even hotter temperatures and more strong winds to much of the country, fanning hundreds of blazes already burning out of control.
For these fire crews, conditions are bad and quickly getting worse. Thousands of firefighters are on the ground, battling unforgiving weather. The extreme heat and volatile winds make a deadly combination as bushfires burn at emergency levels in 3 Australian states. In New South Wales, one local government minister described it as like an atomic bomb hitting the region. Fires already caused major devastation here on New Year's Eve. They're making a frightening return, with conditions even more unpredictable.
We're looking at saving lives today and not so much property because it's so extreme. And the crews will be very vigilant of any changes in conditions.
The crisis is already Australia's longest recorded bushfire emergency, and millions of hectares of land has been burnt. Scientists estimate around 500 million wildlife have been killed. In South Australia, on the popular tourist destination of Kangaroo Island, 2 people died in a fire. Authorities said it was virtually unstoppable. In Malakuta, in the state of Victoria, where thousands of holidaymakers were stranded on a beach, the sky turned a haunting shade of crimson as fires ravaged the region. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has been criticised for being too slow to roll out a national response to the crisis, but he finally announced Army reserves and 3 Navy ships will be deployed to help. This bushfire season is far from over, but it's caused so much devastation across Australia. In this southern part of New South Wales, it's not uncommon to see streets like this one with rows of houses completely decimated. This holiday resort has become a makeshift home for many families, forced to escape the fires. The Burkes don't know what they'll do now. Their house burnt down on New Year's Eve.
By the time we were able to go through, we had been told on the way home that there was a grim possibility that our house was still there because fires surrounded it. When we were finally able to get there, the whole house was engulfed in flames. So there was nothing salvable of it, Their entire extended family has now been evacuated and are waiting for things to return to normal. With no significant rain forecast for at least a few weeks, that prospect is still very far away.
So it's going to be a very long afternoon, a very long evening, and as that southerly approaches, it's going to be a gusty southerly, it's going to be a southerly, it's going to be a volatile southerly, with wind strengths expected to be up to 80 kilometres or more, gusting along the coastal strip.
More than 100,000 people were told to leave their homes across 3 states, while there was still a chance to get away. Not everyone managed. On Kangaroo Island, 2 people died as their car was overtaken by a blaze that broke containment lines. Australia's Prime Minister says the fire crisis has reached a new level.
Also made a startling discovery. Not only are there more black holes than previously thought, but these black holes actually may be more destructive than we suspected. Here's Natasha Sweet.
Researchers have uncovered more than a dozen black holes in a recent study. And according to the findings, these black holes are actually moving and consuming surrounding material like stars, planets, and moons. According to research from Montana State University, there may be far more black holes wandering space than previously thought and more aggressive. The team utilized dwarf galaxies in the study. According to lead researcher Amy Rains, dwarf galaxies are one of the best ways to see the origin of the first seeds of super supermassive black holes. The team was able to form a candidate list of 111 galaxies by surveying galaxies in the NASA Sloan Atlas, then cross-referencing those candidates with the National Radio Astronomy Observatory's faint images of the radio sky at 20 centimeters. The team then discovered 13 black holes in dwarf galaxies less than a billion light years away. But scientists saw something very different. These predatory black holes were found to be roving around other galaxies as opposed to being stationary. And while moving, these black holes are reportedly consuming materials such as stars, planets, and moons. Rain says this work has taught us that we must broaden our searches for massive black holes in dwarf galaxies beyond their centers to get a more complete understanding of the population and learn what mechanisms help form the first massive black holes in the early universe.
The Pacific Northwest is heading east. Winds whipped up the snow north of Seattle this week, blasting roads and reducing visibility to almost zero in some spots.
It's making its way across the United States. Parts of the Northwest saw several feet of snow, strong winds, and rain on Thursday. Here's a look at Bellingham, Washington, where hazardous conditions left some drivers stranded on roads. The storm is expected to head east. Travelers might be impacted headed into the holiday weekend.
We begin in St. John's, where the mayor has just declared a state of emergency. A major blizzard is slamming the region, and as you can see, there's very little visibility on the roads due to all that blowing snow. The forecast suggests these treacherous conditions won't be letting up anytime soon.
Hi, John. Well, as you said, the mayor of St. John's has declared a state of emergency. That state of emergency is in effect immediately and until further notice. And what that means is that all businesses have been ordered to shut down. All vehicles other than emergency vehicles have been ordered off the road. So in that statement from the city of St. John's, they actually say no vehicles are permitted to use city streets. Plows will continue, but otherwise the city of St. John's urging people stay home, do not drive until this state of emergency has been
struck. Then the tsunami submerged this third floor. Destruction doesn't describe it. The deadly wall of water engulfing entire communities. Slamming through the walls of Fukushima's power station, knocking out backup generators. Meltdowns and explosions followed. Then the radiation came. Like the Chernobyl disaster, relived in last year's HBO series. Fukushima's fallout, not as toxic as Chernobyl, but just as frightening. After learning about Chernobyl, this Buddhist priest kept a Geiger counter at his temple, knowing he was near a nuclear plant.
This is the radiation.
Then his worst fears came true.
How did you feel when you saw this?
So scared.
Radiation from the meltdown spreading to nearby towns and beyond. Thousands of residents near the plant ordered to evacuate, like Futaba, only 2 miles away. This was Main Street. Once home to almost 7,000 people, it's now a ghost town. The last place in Fukushima still uninhabited. Now, only wildlife live here.
The danger is large areas of fields and forests haven't been decontaminated, like this.
Our radiation monitor raises the alarm. Levels too high for people to live here. Former Futaba residents Anthony Ballard and Philip Jellyman have been coming back to the exclusion zone with special permission. Taking pictures. Initially keeping record for friends and neighbours. Now holding on to memories.
Heavy rain and severe thunderstorms have been sweeping across parts of Australia, bringing some much-needed relief to help contain those massive bushfires. But it's also causing flash flooding in some areas. Fires have scorched vegetation that would normally soak up all that precipitation, and the land is so parched in places that rain is just running off, not soaking in. The Australian Reptile Park in Summersby, New South Wales had to be closed because of the flooding. Water was above the fence lines in some parts of the park. They say it hasn't been this bad in more than 15 years.
Rain, but no one expected this. Roads now rivers, residents forced to row boats down Gold Coast streets. The deluge causing landslides, water cascading through houses at Oxenford.
Our property, and it was about half a metre deep.
Backyards got water features, whether their owners wanted them or not.
Well, firstly I thought, oh wow, that's going to be really difficult to kind of clean up. And then I realised it's a lot worse than I thought it was. So I really didn't know what to do.
Residents could do little but watch the water rise around them in their streets, yards and homes.
Bucket it down, we've got water through the roof and backyard. People above us, all their water's coming through our yard.
Cars swallowed up and sent floating down suburban streets.
There's a car there, a yellow one, gone.
A lucky escape for two people at Currumbin after a tree fell onto their car. Holiday makers at this Helensvale caravan park forced to flee in the early hours for their safety.
People were pretty distraught, especially children. Yeah, it was pretty hectic. Yeah, pretty quick. It just rose up so quick.
Dozens of caravans have been destroyed, campers forced to pack up and move on. The big wet meant big delays. Queensland's busiest highway, the M1, closed in both directions for 6 hours as water levels rose, causing mayhem on the motorway, leaving many drivers frustrated.
No one's given me any advice.
Some gave it a shot anyway. Many others caught out. Movie World looked more like Wet and Wild, closed for the day. Dreamworld shut down too. Car parks normally full at this time of year, completely empty. Entire sports precincts were swamped. Tennis courts became swimming pools. Horses at Mudgeeraba walked to higher ground, cows soggy and stranded as water rose around them. The deluge starting in the early hours, dumping up to 330 millimetres of rain, almost double the January average on parts of the Gold Coast in a matter of hours.
We saw some 1 in 100 year thresholds being met over southeast Queensland.
291 millimetres fell at Burleigh Waters, 301 at Carrara. Parts of the Sunshine Coast got up to 150 millimetres. Some localised flooding in Brisbane, 106 millimetres recorded at Mount Cootha. While the waters have receded quickly, the clean-up could take weeks.
There was nothing we could have done. It just, when it floods, there's nothing that'll stop it.
More than 500 insurance claims were lodged within hours of the storms, that number expected to rise.